Now, in this F the Formula series, maybe I'm a heretic, maybe I'm not. I don't know. That's something God and I will figure out along the way. But what I do know is, very simply, is that I'm walking through Scripture and I am continually pointing out places where Jesus himself in here seems to put way more significance on the person in front of him, on the situation, on the sacred moment, than he does any sort of religious doctrine or cultural mandate of the day. Jesus consistently seems to say F the formula. Consistently. Because what we see in the life of Jesus is a man who's more caught up in the relationship and the person and the moment and what's going on right in front of him than he is in the formula of what the culture tells him to be caught up in. And so this whole series, that's the heartbeat. That's what I want us to get. That's what I want us to see, is that at the very root of this whole thing, it's a drawing closer to Jesus is the result of F the formula. As I've thought and processed it more and more and more as I've gone through this whole thing, the ironic thing about it is, as edgy and as sacrilegious as F the formula might sound, might come across, might like hit the earwaves, is something that is like, I don't know what to do with that. The ironic thing about it all is that all it does is point you back to Jesus. That's it. I mean, that's the big ironic thing of the whole concept, is that as edgy as it might come across, it is simply pointing you back to Jesus. See, a formula is easy. A formula is simple to live out. You can easily put the variables in place and live out a formula. It's way more difficult to say F the formula. I'm trusting Jesus, and by faith, I'm walking forward into the unknown. That's way more difficult. Way more difficult. See, the idea of F the formula, as I've told you many times, it is simply this. That we as people who want to look like Jesus, walk like Jesus, talk like Jesus, all these things, F the formula is simply us walking by faith. Shout it from the rooftops. Do you hear me in the back? By faith. We are trusting Jesus is bigger than the things man has constructed. That's what it is. That's what F the formula is. Because you don't have to be a historian, you don't have to be a biblical scholar, you don't have to be in the know of all the things religious that have ever happened to realize that consistently throughout history, when we have rigidly stuck to formulas, we have hurt people time and time and time again. But in the Gospels, when we see Jesus himself say, forget the formula. I'm entering into this moment in time that is sacred and that is beautiful. And regardless of what the formulas tell me to do, I'm doing what I feel is right to do in this moment. And I wonder throughout history, if we had been a people that are willing to embrace in faith this concept, how many things we would not have done that have caused who knows how much pain and hurt in people because we've rigidly stuck to a formula. Now see, I have always been someone who's a big fan of the gray. I'm a big fan of the mystery. I've never been a black and white person. I love to be able to just discuss and debate and talk about all these different kinds of ideas when they don't seem to line up. But as a pastor and as a preacher and leading churches and ministries and all these things, I never in a million years would I have been able to preach a sermon or a sermon series called F the Formula, right? Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it just because the title alone wouldn't make it past the committee that decides what I can say or not say. It wouldn't even have made it out the gates. Like I couldn't even get past the doorway with the title, right? But B, more so than the title, the concept is really something that makes people uneasy. For your pastor, your leader, your shepherd to get up there and talk about things in this book that seem to be confusing, that seem to maybe contradict one another, that seem to not line up with everything I've always thought I knew, to maybe create some doubts and some questions. People don't want their preachers and their pastors and their shepherds to do that. They just don't. I mean, I've been around long enough. I've been in church long enough. I've been in ministry long enough. I've led in enough churches to know that is a fact. It is not a theory. It's a fact I know of because I've seen it. It's a fact I know of because I lived it. I would have leaders and people that were older and wiser and lived longer and all that stuff tell me like, JR, look, you can't preach or talk about those kinds of things because it is your job to shepherd your flock, and therefore you can't say fill in the blank. Now let me go ahead and say something that I think might be kind of harsh, and so let me just cushion it with this. If this does not apply to you, then it does not apply to you. So don't take it offensively. I know there are plenty of good pastors out there who do a really good job of shepherding their flock. I believe that. I know them. But I also know that a lot of times the concept of shepherding your flock is simply a fancy way of saying you are coddling them. You are sheltering them. You are keeping them in a nice, safe bubble because you don't want them to start thinking things. You don't want them to start questioning things. You don't want them to have doubts ever. How dare they think their own thoughts, right? It's like Ben Stiller in Dodgeball, right? Where he's like, how dare you make me bleed my own blood, right? How dare you make me think my own thoughts, right? We don't want to do that. Pastors and churches everywhere don't want the preacher to speak and talk about things that might make people in their congregation, in their flock, in their worlds walk out the door and start to think things, think their own thoughts, have some questions, maybe have some doubts. We don't want them to do that, so we shepherd them. And by shepherd them, we coddle them to death. We spoon feed them to death. We don't let them go off on their own and own their faith. So the F the formula concept is terrifying to some. I'll say terrifying to many. And what I've realized is I've kind of gone down this path and gone down this road. I had this like mind-blowing revelation. So pay attention to this because this is good. I'm going to say that as humbly as I can. I wish I had my board up here. It's down in the basement. I haven't figured out how to put it up here yet. But humility is what I start with, right? So let me say this with as much humility as I can. This is good, okay? For most of my life, I would read things in this book. I'd read stories. I'd read things Jesus himself said. I'd read things that didn't seem to line up. This didn't seem to match up with this, or this story didn't seem to line up with this story, or I didn't know what to do with this thing or this thing or this thing. And my whole life, my immediate thought and struggle was, man, I don't know how to reconcile that with Jesus. I don't know how to reconcile that story with the heart of God. I don't know how to reconcile that story with what I know about Jesus. I don't know how to reconcile this thing with what I know about Jesus. That was the phrase that would come out of my mouth if I'd be sitting there with somebody over coffee or sitting in a group debating stuff. And I'd be, I don't know how to reconcile this with Jesus. But what I've realized, the more I pressed into Jesus, which again, that's what F the formula does. It causes you to press into Jesus. The more I pressed into Jesus, the more I've gone on this journey, the more I've lived life by faith. What I've realized is this. This is the good thing I was telling you about. It's not about reconciling it with Jesus. There was the struggle. See, Jesus is just Jesus. There's nothing to reconcile to. He's Jesus. He can do what he wants to do. He can do this one day and then that another day, and it's fine because he's Jesus, right? He gets the trump card. He is the ace of spades. He can do whatever he wants to do. So it's not a matter of reconciling it to Jesus. It's a matter of the fact that we have trouble reconciling it to our formulas. We have trouble reconciling these things to our denomination, to our doctrines, to the things that we've been taught and indoctrinated with. That's what we have a hard time reconciling them to. Not to Jesus, because Jesus is Jesus. He can do what he wants to do. But we have a hard time reconciling them to our formulas. And the reality is you have a choice. You can live your life by formulas, or you can live your life by faith. One of those is clearly scriptural. The other one is man-made. The more we look at this whole thing, the more we explore it, the more we dive into it, you should realize real quickly that it's never been a problem of reconciling these things to Jesus. It is a problem reconciling these things to our formulas. And that's what I'm not about anymore. I can't be bothered with the formulas when my eyes are focused on Jesus. Period. And so tonight I want to dive into another story which continues to show us this. It continues to show us that the formula is all over the Gospels and Jesus is smack dab in the middle of it. So Luke 19, if you got your word, if you don't, no worries. Y'all know how I do. I'm going to talk through it. We're going to walk through it. It's going to be good. And then tonight in this chapter, I want to show y'all 3 things where Jesus clearly in this story says the formula. And it actually helps us, it should help us to relax a little, to breathe easy, to be able to, in fact, like lift the weight off our shoulders and walk in peace a little more deeply. Because when we see the formula play itself out over and over and over again, it presses into a deeper faith and trust in Jesus, which is what we want, right? Isn't that what we all want? Isn't that really the call of Scripture? The call of the life of following Jesus is a life of trust and faith in Jesus. At its simplest, rawest, most authentic place is simple faith and trust in Jesus. So Luke chapter 19, we're going to be verses 1 through 10. We're talking about a guy named Zacchaeus, okay? Now, there's only 10 verses, so I'm going to read some. I'll talk a little bit, read some, talk a little bit. Then I'll give you the 3 areas where we see the formula in this story. So chapter 19, the Gospel of Luke, starting verse 1. Here we go. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, okay? Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. Now, let me give you a little spoiler alert. He was passing through, but he went on to do some seriously significant things in this town, okay? So he's passing through, but while he's passing through, he goes on to do something very, very, very significant. Now, I want y'all to hear that because a lot of us in life, we kind of hit the pause button on being able to impact and influence people if we are in a passing through season. If we're just passing through a job, if we're just passing through a gym, if we're just passing through a town, if we're just passing through a season, if we're just passing through, we tend to hit pause on our ability to have massive impact because we're just passing through. We can't really put our feet down and plant ourselves in impact because we're just passing through. And I think a lot of us have probably experienced that in life. Some of y'all are probably right there right now, is that you kind of have a hesitation to really get involved and get in the mix and impact people because you're just passing through. In this story, Jesus himself is passing through, and yet we're about to see some radical impact regardless of the fact that he is passing through. So Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was. That's a powerful sentence. And it's a reminder. It should be a reminder to all of you. Is that there are people out there, people that you would never imagine, people you would never think of, people that you would never ever expect, but they are right now wanting to see who Jesus is. And for whatever reason, we put all our friends, all our relationships, all our family members, all the people at work, all the people at our gym, all the people we hoop with, all the people in our street, all of our neighbors, we've already put them in boxes. And we've said, okay, these people, maybe, these people, oh yeah, we've done that. when you never have a clue or a concept of who out there right now wants to see who Jesus is. Zacchaeus would have been one. They were like, wait a second, this cat wants to see who Jesus? What? No way. If you were a betting man back then and there were odds on whether Zacchaeus would want to see Jesus, they would be highly, highly in your favor. You'd be winning some money if you took that bet. Like, no way. But Zacchaeus was a man who wanted to see who Jesus was. But being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So Jesus is walking through, there's a big crowd. Zacchaeus is a short man. He can't see over the crowd, but he wants to. He wants to see what's going on. He wants to see who Jesus was, but there was stuff in his way. So just realize that there are people in all of our lives who want to see Jesus right now. They want to know who Jesus is. They want to understand who Jesus is. Not what church is, not what religion is, not what all this political bureaucratic church stuff is. They want to know who Jesus is, but there are hindrances in their way right now. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but he was a short man, and so he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see Jesus, because Jesus was coming that way. So he ran up ahead, climbed up in a tree so he could see Jesus coming on through. This guy wanted to see who Jesus was. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus. So he reaches the spot, there's this whole crowd, there's this little rich tax collector perched up in a tree. Jesus looks up and sees him and is like, yo, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. I got to stay at your house today. So come on down. I'm coming to your house. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly, right? I mean, you can imagine this guy really wants to see who Jesus was. He went through the crowd, climbed up in a tree. He's up there. I just love the scene, right? You got a little, short, rich tax collector, probably like with a little beard, like twisting his mustache a little bit, up in the tree, like trying to see Jesus. Like, yo, my boy, come down, because I'm coming to your house. Now, that's a whole side conversation, because we've already dove into the fact that there are people out there right now who want to see who Jesus is, who we've already in our minds and our hearts decided no way in a million years would they want to see who Jesus is. We've already decided that because we are a judgmental, sinful, flawed bunch of people. So we've already made those snap judgments that no way this person wants to see who Jesus is. So we've already done that. But even more so than that, not only have we done that, we've already said that, like, and just maybe if Jesus did want to see them, or if they did want to see Jesus, there's not going to be anything like major or extravagant happen with it, because we've already put them in that box. So not only does Jesus encounter this guy, Jesus calls him by name and says, yo, I want to come to your house. Some of y'all need to be reminded of that. Some of y'all out there who you're not churchy, you're not a Jesus guy, you don't do the religious thing, which I'm with you. There's a reason I'm not in the church anymore. There's a reason I'm not pastoring a church anymore. There's a reason that's not my job anymore. There's a reason why I have beef with the way church in a lot of ways is done. So I get it. I feel you. But you need to understand that regardless of where you are in life, regardless of what you affiliate with, regardless of whether you choose to be a church guy or not a church guy, choose to be religious or not religious, choose to put faith in this, that, and the other, regardless of all of that, Jesus knows your name. He knows your name. He knows who you are. He adores you, period. Right this second, he adores you. Despite your flaws, despite your doubts, despite the fact that you want nothing to do with church stuff, he don't care. He knows your name and he loves you. He adores you. He thinks you are it, period. He sees this guy by name, Zacchaeus. I'm coming to your house. So Zacchaeus comes down, welcomes him gladly. And all the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. He's gone to be the guest of a sinner. They muttering, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. Now, let me give you all the first F the formula. I told you we got three. First one. There will always be people in your culture, in your town, in your world, in your environment. There will always be people that will mutter and talk about who you spend time with, who you sit down and have dinner with, who you choose to invest in. There will always be people looking in, muttering that you're choosing to be with those people. Always. Always. Religious folks and our cultural acceptable things will always be trying to dictate who it's acceptable for you to spend time with, who it's acceptable for you to go have dinner with, who it's acceptable for you to have over to your house and invest in. There will always be the religious so-and-sos trying to dictate who you are allowed to pour into. Jesus says, F the formula. I don't care what people, religious folks tell me I can and can't be with, because I walk by my own beat and I'm entering into this man's house because this moment matters, period. There's always going to be folks trying to dictate who you are and are not allowed to be with. Jesus did not let any religious or cultural no-nos dictate who he hung out with, period. He says after formula, this moment matters. So the people were muttering, oh man, he's going to be the guest of a sinner. How dare he? So he goes to Zacchaeus' house, and Zacchaeus stands up and says to the Lord, he says to Jesus, look, Lord, here and now. Okay, let me just rewind, pause, whatever. Jesus has done nothing yet except encounter Zacchaeus. That's it. That's all that has happened up until this point. The only thing that's happened is Zacchaeus has encountered Jesus. That's it. There's been no incredible sermon. There's been no podcast. There's been no worship set. There's been no walking him through anything. There's been no long, deep conversations about eternity. There's been no conversations of what happens if you got hit by a bus and died tonight. Where would you end up? There's been none of that. He has simply encountered him. That's it. And in that encounter, just a simple encounter, Zacchaeus is so radically impacted. Zacchaeus stands up and says to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor. Remember, this is a wealthy man. He's a wealthy man who probably got his wealth by a lot of corruption, because that's the way it went back then. And he feels this burden, and he stands up and says, look, I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Just by encountering Jesus. And that is the second at the formula moment. If you grew up in church, you've ever been around churchy people, if you've ever been to a really fiery sermon, there is this onus put on us that it is our job to bring people to salvation. It is our job to do this Christian thing so well that just by doing it so well, you will radically impact people. And that radical impact will lead these people into this glorious moment with Jesus. That it is on you to know it well enough, live it well enough, speak it well enough, that you yourself can bring people into a beautiful moment with Jesus. That is a weight that has been put on church folks for 2,000 plus years. Is that it is on you to enter in to this and change their lives. But guys, I want to break it to you. I want to give you some good news that is refreshing, that is like, whoo, that's good. That makes me feel better. Is that all you have to do is let people encounter Jesus, and just that in and of itself can radically impact a life. Again, we don't see Jesus walk through the sinner's prayer with this guy. We don't see Jesus pull him aside and have this very share the gospel with him moment. We don't see this situation play out like a lot of us think a revival service should end, right? We don't see this guy walk down the aisle. We don't see Jesus sit down with them and take out a little cube that folds out into a cross and says, hey, let me tell you about, like, we don't see any of that. We simply see him encounter Jesus. That's it. And this guy's life is so radically changed that without any kind of urging, without any kind of pressure, without any kind of like twisting his arm, let me go ahead and be real vulnerable and honest with y'all. Can I do that? Can I just be real? Like, man, I'll try not to cry as I do it, right? But preachers everywhere, we feel this pressure and this weight to preach in such a way that we can do such a good job that by the end of the sermon, by the end of the service, whatever it is, people will flood the aisles because I've done such a good job of bringing them to Jesus. So we play through that worship song at the end of the sermon, and that song's playing, and you're looking out, and you might see a couple come down, but in your heart, you're like, we want more. I want more people to come know this Jesus guy. So I look back at the worship guy, and I'm like, give him the little wink, like, keep it going. Make sure you hit the right chords. Let's get it popping, right? So that maybe more will come down, right? Because we have this weight that we feel that it is our job to bring salvation to people. It is my job to do it. And just in case y'all didn't know this, none of you can save anybody. In case you didn't know that, none of you can. But what I can do is I can be a vessel that brings Jesus into the room and let people encounter Jesus, and then let Jesus do what only Jesus can do. And the reason why the F the formula thing is so powerful is because it's very easy. It's very easy for people to say things like, well, JR, the scriptures themselves, they say, go forth in all the nations and make disciples of all people, right? Scripture itself says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. JR, you do have a responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, you're right. Scripture does say those things. And yet we see also in the Gospels Jesus not do those things. And so the reason why F the formula is there is because there are times where those things are the thing for you to be doing. But if you rigidly stick to the formula, you very well can miss Jesus and his leading in the moment. Because too often, I've seen it so many times. Christian friends of mine, preachers, leaders, whatever you want to call them, they feel so pressured to bring the heat in every conversation, in every moment, in every sit down over coffee, in every park bench moment. They see that moment as the only chance, and so they just give it to them. And does it work every time? Of course not. Does every one of those moments end up in some glorious salvation experience? Of course not. Are there plenty of those moments where the person that just got beat down with your need to present the thing to them ends up with them not wanting anything to do with you anymore? Yes. It's happened time and time and time again because you're so caught up in the formula that you're missing what Jesus is doing in the moment. In the Zacchaeus moment, his life was radically shifted simply because Jesus was there, period. So Zacchaeus has this change of heart. I'm going to give away all this stuff. I'm going to give back to people that I cheated. I'm going to go all in. And then here's where we get to the third F the formula moment in the passage. In verse 9, Jesus says to him, okay, so Zacchaeus just has this huge heart transformation, right? This huge heart transformation, which has led to action of him wanting to do these things. So he's had this huge heart transformation. He said, I'm going to do these things. But again, remember, there's been no sinner's prayer said. There's been no moment where he is called upon the name of the Lord out of a pure heart. There's been none of the things that we would all say. These are the things that have to happen in order for salvation to come. None of those things have happened. But in verse 9, Jesus says, Zacchaeus, today, right now, salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. Okay, so this third F the formula moment is a big one because there's a lot of legs to it, okay? He just says that the salvation has come, and you could infer that part of it or all of it was because we saw this heart transformation. Right? He knows our heart. He doesn't look at the external, he looks at the internal, right? God knows our heart, right? So Jesus sees this heart transformation. This guy Zacchaeus who got wealthy in a corrupt way. He wants to give a lot of that wealth away. He's done with it. He's done doing it that way. Even when I cheated, I want to give back to. I'm sorry. Like we see this heart transformation. So you can infer that might be where the salvation aspect's coming from. Jesus knows his heart. There's a transformation, right? But then he says, because you too are a son of Abraham. So is that the salvation? You're a son of Abraham? And so that's why you are saved? Because I'm just reading the words of Jesus. You know, the old red letters, right? I'm just reading what Jesus says. Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. So salvation came because he had a heart transformation. Salvation came because he's a son of Abraham. Salvation came as a combo of both of those. I don't know. All I know is that neither one of those are what we traditionally say is the way that people find salvation. Neither one of those are. They're very unique to this moment, to this person, to this situation. But it gets even crazier. Because not only does he say, okay, salvation has come because you're a son of Abraham, you just had a heart change, salvation has come. But he doesn't just say, Zacchaeus, you, my man, you alone, you as a man. Like remember when we talked about the thief on the cross, and he says to the thief, says, hey, you too will be in paradise today. And all the thief had done was say, yo, don't forget your boy when you get up to heaven. That's all he did. And Jesus says, cool, done. You're in heaven, right? That was a very individual, significant moment for that person, right? So it'd be very easy for this to be another individual thing that Jesus says to Zacchaeus, specifically, Zacchaeus, you have this heart transformation. Zacchaeus, you're a son of Abraham. You will get salvation because of those things. It'd be very easy for it to be an individual thing. But he says, no. Salvation has come to this house. Salvation has come to this house. Now, let me go ahead and tell you that in the Greek, that house word, oiko, can actually mean house, right? Like the structure, which it doesn't mean that because this is not the world where you can have Christian CDs and Christian books and Christian houses, right? Like the house didn't get saved, right? So the salvation has not come to the physical structure of the house. Like there weren't walls and bricks that were like getting baptized. Like, oh, praise the Lord, I'm saved now. These bricks go to heaven, right? It doesn't mean the house, right? In the Greek, it can mean, and here's where it gets even more, it can mean, listen, it can mean the household, his family, his entire lineage, or a nation. The Greek word can mean all of those things. All we know is that Jesus said salvation has come to this house. Now, whichever one of those you want to pick from, you want to say it's his family, you want to say that it's everyone that lives in the house. So if he had like a couple kids in the house, a wife in the house, grandparents in the house, auntie and uncle in the house. They're all included, like at the package deal. If you're paying rent and you're living under this roof, you got salvation today. Like maybe it's that. Maybe it's his entire lineage, like everyone that was part of Zacchaeus' family. Because he did just say the reason why he got salvation was because he was a son of Abraham. So there might be something to that whole lineage thing that Zacchaeus used did something today that's going to impact your whole lineage. Point is, we don't know. There's no clarification. There's no footnote. There's no asterisk that says, oh, by the way, what that means is there isn't. All we know is that it was not just Zacchaeus. It was the house. It was more than just him that were impacted by him. I mean, I grew up in church multiple times a week. I'm there. Every week I'm at the church 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. I went to every camp you could go to, every retreat you could go to, every big summer event you could go to. I did everything churchy you could possibly do. I probably heard thousands and thousands and thousands of sermons in my life. And I've heard so many conversations on what salvation looks like and how you get it and how you claim it and how you lock it in. I've heard so many, but never, y'all say it, never have I heard. And here's the deal, guys. If you get saved, your whole family gets saved. If you get saved, everyone in the house you're living with gets saved. If you're a college kid and you live in a big old frat house with 24 guys and you get saved, all the frat guys get saved. If you are living with your girlfriend and you get saved, she gets saved. If you're living at home with your wife and your 7 kids and you're taking care of your grandmother, you get saved. Everybody gets saved. It's like Oprah, like you get a salvation and you get a salvation and you. Never have I heard that, ever. Yet we see Jesus say to Zacchaeus, who had a change of heart and who was the son of Abraham, the salvation has come to your house. Y'all, that is about as clear of an F the formula moment as I have ever or will ever see in the Gospels. It does not go according to what we know or think of when it comes to salvation. It just doesn't. Jesus does what Jesus does, period. And as I said, whenever I said it, that some of y'all will be like, well, JR, that's Jesus. Jesus can do what Jesus wants to do because he's Jesus. I'm just Shelly. I'm just Colin. I'm just Case. I'm just Abby. I can't do that. I can't play a trump card. But Jesus says that you will do even greater things because you have the Holy Spirit in you. You will do bigger, more, greater. You have an opportunity to impact lives in a more radical way than you've ever fathomed. But in order to do that, in order to see things happen that you only imagined and dreamed of being able to happen, you have to be willing to leave the formulas behind, because the formulas can only get you so far. The formulas can only take you so high. The formulas can only do what the formulas can do. The formulas are man-made, and man-made stuff is not as big as Jesus. But boy, if you put that faith and trust in Jesus, that he's bigger than what man has constructed, and if you can be so bold and so confident and so willing to say, F the formula, I'm walking with Jesus here. I'm going to let Jesus lead. I'm going to let Jesus take my hand. Let Jesus take the wheel. I'm going to let Jesus do his thing. Then we can see miraculous things happen in ways that we never fathomed for them to happen. But if any of you grew up in the same kind of church world I grew up, if any of you grew up in any sort of boxed in, very tightly structured, formula-driven religious world, man, you are missing the beauty and the freedom and the bigness of Jesus by being handcuffed to your formulas. So when we look at the story of Zacchaeus, we see Jesus once again, as he continues to do in the gospel, say F the formula. Because this moment, this person, this sacred moment in time is more significant than what the religious doctrines of the day tell me, what the culture mandates for me. I'm entering into this moment and I'm making things happen that will blow your minds. Guys, I did the formula thing for far, far too long. And I have no idea until I get to heaven someday and he says, I love you, bro, but let me go ahead and tell you how many incredibly sacred moments you missed out on because you just tapped into the formula and you didn't let me lead in that moment. And it's going to suck when that happens. But I have no doubt that it has happened countless times in my life. Because like many of us, we are boxed into, conditioned to, indoctrinated to formulas. And formulas are so much easier. It is risky and scary to say F the formula because it requires that you, by faith, step out of the boat and start walking on water. And most of us don't want to do it. But I encourage you to be men and women to do that. I encourage you to be men and women who step out there and be bold and say F the formula and embrace Jesus and what he's doing and see lives impacted accordingly. So I love you guys. I'm thankful for you guys. I believe in y'all. I believe in what this community's doing. And I can't wait to hear all the radical stories from your journey when you say F the formula. So until next time, whatever next time is, keep hollering at me. Keep sending me some message. Keep the community going. Let's keep chatting. The virtual thing is phenomenal in so many ways. And let's keep rolling. F the formula. Let's do it. Love y'all. Peace.